It's so heartwarming to see our city filled with lovers of Jerusalem. Thank you for being here.
Christians from more than 30 nations around the world have gathered in Jerusalem to say from the Holocaust to new life, Shalu Shalom Yerushalayim, pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
The founders of this march are essentially descendants of Nazis. And, you know, to have human beings coming and saying something so awful happened, we're going to spend our lives trying to correct and compensate for that, and to create a movement like that.
I am from a city in which the university is, where Nazi perpetrators, SS murderers were educated and trained, and they were responsible for the death of 700,000 Jews, and that's why we started researching the history of our city.
March of Life founder Jobst Bittner says German families usually don't speak about their Nazi past.
We discovered that only once we're willing to actually speak the truth about the past, we'll be able to take responsibility both for the present and the future. And that's why we decided to give that call to the nations and to call hundreds of thousands to the streets to raise their voices against anti-Semitism, the hatred of Jews, and for Israel.
Bittner, like many in the march, has a personal story.
My own father was an officer in the Wehrmacht, the German army, and he was in France and in northern Africa. And as an officer of the Wehrmacht, he shared in that responsibility for the deportation of Jews, for the murder of Jews.
Now he sees their responsibility is to stand with Israel, especially in times of crisis.
Together with our Jewish friends, hand in hand, we want to walk and stand for Israel, and that's our theme, united to be a light.
Many of us found out that our fathers, great-grandfathers, they were Nazis, they were part of the Shoah, they were concentration camp guards, they were part of the Wehrmacht.
Heinz Roy's family shared a mixed past. While his Dutch great-grandmother hid Jews in her home, his German-Austrian great-grandfather took a different path.
Because he was part of the Lutheran church that was not supporting Hitler, so I thought, okay, everything was okay. But then I started to read his diaries and his letters. And what I found out is that he withdrew from his Jewish friends at that time. So he didn't speak up. He just didn't want to have anything to do with that. And that's the problem, because at that time, people who knew better didn't do anything.
The March of Life began as a movement of repentance.
We realized that the same silence towards the Jewish people, it's also in our own hearts. And in 2007, we learned that there were 8 concentration camps around our little town of Tübingen in southern Germany. And there were death marches at the end of the war towards Dachau. And then we had the impression, and actually a word from the Lord, to say, why not do a March of Life on these trails of the death march?
They walked 300 kilometers, retracing the steps along those different routes over 3 days.
And we had reconciliation meetings in the middle of it, and beautiful encounters between the descendants of the Nazis and the Holocaust survivors and the descendants of Holocaust survivors.
What they initially saw as a one-time event is now worldwide. Marches have been held in hundreds of cities through 25 countries. In the U.S., it's called the March of Remembrance. Ahead of the Jerusalem event, President Isaac Herzog commended the group for its courage in facing their dark past. He wrote, "Your presence demonstrates unwavering moral support for our nation-state and its people, and the State of Israel welcomes you with open arms."
Well, I know that my grandfathers were part of the army. I don't know much about it, but they were part of the system. I'm happy that I could be a part of this movement, because I know in Germany most people say it's past, it's gone, but that's not true. It's part of our heritage.
I can take a stand for the past, the present and the future with being part of the march.
Global Zionist movement leader Yehuda Glick welcomed the marchers, saying he hopes to see many more visiting and standing with Israel in the future.
Now it's the time to raise the banner of God on the place that he chose in Zion. It's time for the nations, just like we, the Jewish people, took our destiny in our hands and came back home. Now the nations have to stand up for Zion and make sure Zion is a house of prayer for all nations.
In a powerful show of support less than 80 years after the Holocaust, the March of Life sang the Aaronic blessing over the Jewish people and Israel. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.